Welcome to Inside the Collective, where we dig into the thinking behind how people work. Today, I'm joined by Frances Gaillard, brand architect, cultural translator, advertising nerd, and founder of 43 Elephants. Frances has spent years helping global brands grow across complex markets, creative systems, high-pressure environments, and she's worked across TBWA, DDB, JKR, BBDO, and a bunch of other letters all smashed together. She's been leading teams and clients through the kind of work that asks for both strategic clarity and creative ambition. What stands out in Frances' story is her focus on the conversations behind the work, how trust gets built, how clarity gets created, and how better conditions often lead to better ideas. Now, through 43 Elephants, she's building a specialist brand and growth collective for founder-led and challenger businesses navigating reinvention, acceleration, and change. Frances, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here, Brad.
We love to start with a warm-up that I just call rapid fire. So it's this or that. Don't think about it, just straight from the gut.
Okay.
Instinct or evidence?
Instinct, for sure.
Clarity or surprise?
Tricky. Surprise.
Global consistency or local nuance?
Local nuance.
Founder energy or brand discipline?
Founder energy.
Campaigns people love or campaigns that work?
People love, for sure.
Nice. All right, let's get stuck into the more challenging questions.
Oh my God, that was not challenging.
What first pulled you into brands and creative work?
Wow. It was either working in advertising or working in my dad's engineering company designing his manuals. So I think from a young age, from an early age for me, I was very clear in terms of stuff I didn't want to do. It was hard to understand what I really wanted to do since I graduated from university, but I kind of went with what was fun, what was interesting for me, what was exciting. And for some reason, my first job was working at this little shop, boutique, super small shop in Singapore called Modern Age. And I swear I only got hired because I went to the same school as the owner. But
it helps.
It helps. But it was my first exposure to really brands and marketing. And that's when I think one of my first jobs there was designing tray mats for McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dude, I was like, oh my God, I'm doing something big. This is major work. People are going to see the stuff that I do. So I think for me, it was a lot of instinct, a lot of listening to kind of what I didn't like, and then just taking it from there.
Yeah. I think my first job, like real kind of advertising job, they brought me into the room and they're like, okay, so you're going to be redesigning the Royal Bank of Canada's website. And I remember just freezing, going like, dude, this is day one. But it was a great project.
You know, back in those days, they just throw you into the deep end.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Trial by fire is definitely how I learned. You call yourself an advertising nerd. What still fascinates you about this industry?
So I studied politics in school, and one of the things that really interested me about that topic was less the theory, but more kind of the ability to persuade, the ability to organize, the ability to change someone's mind. And from the beginning, I think, even in the early days for me, it was what drew me to the industry, but still continues to kind of get me excited when we work on certain briefs, is that ability to convey emotion and feeling through storytelling, but also the ability to convince someone why they should buy a certain toothbrush or why they should buy a certain lipstick, because it's all the same. We all know it's all the same, but why this one, right? There's a certain science behind it, which I appreciate and I like, and that changes through the ages. When I first started working, we just started using email, guys. We were still using color printouts to do print advertising. I'm talking proofs instead of digital proofs, like real films. So I think despite the ages, now we've got AI coming on, and that doesn't change. The need to be surprised, the need to be entertained and educated, I think is a very human, universal thing. So that was what drew me there. That's what continues to keep me excited. And I think the new age that's coming up right now with AI is equally frightening, but also very exciting to see where everything shakes out.
I think if we look at it as just another tool in the palette, it's a different context than the all-knowing, all-job stealing. You were mentioning, early days in advertising, and we had a boarding room where you used spray glue to put it on,
God.
and it had a huge exhaust fan because the smell of the glue was
I
intoxicating.
used to love that.
And definitely people didn't go into that room to do other things, for sure.
Oh yeah,
That
no,
never happened.
of course.
Before you had the language for it, what were you naturally good at noticing in brands, people, culture?
I would say the word that I took some time to understand was strategy. And one of the things, and it's again rooted a little bit in this little bit of science, a little bit of art of persuasion, right? And that's one of the things I learned from the very beginning, working with my first few clients, that sometimes when someone says no, they don't know why. And you can almost always change that into a maybe, and then potentially even a why not. And that's a little bit to do. Eventually, I learned what strategy means, what motivations for people are, how you can actually convert them into a different paths of thinking, if different types of behavior. But for me, that's kind of one of the few things that I picked up when I was starting out in the industry. So that, I think the second thing was, and this is also one of the hard things to learn, was looking at work and giving feedback. And from early on, I understood that it matters what you say, even though you're like an account executive and nobody cares what you say. But inevitably they do. And it matters what effort you put into the thinking behind the feedback that you give to your peers, to your colleagues. And I think that still continues to be a journey for a lot of people, I think. In my last gig, one of my ex-bosses taught me a new concept. 20 years into the industry, I still learn new things. It's this concept of feed forward instead of feedback. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I haven't. No, please share.
It was actually really interesting. Oh my God, I can't remember who came up with it, but it was an exercise you did with clients. It was an exercise you did internally, wherein you, instead of looking backwards at a piece of a creative or a piece of work, you worked together with the clients to help them break down what they liked about it, what was resonating with them, what could work harder, what other stuff that they liked, examples of that we could bring into the thinking of this work to make it closer to what they had in their heads. So it's a little bit more than an email that said, take this out, make the logo 50% bigger, change the headline to something that is clearer because nobody understands fun language. It was that. So yeah, I think it's something you learn at the beginning, but also it's something that you continually evolve as people evolve and cultures evolve, of course.
It feels like that changes the context to what this could be from what this shouldn't be, which tends to be what I experience as the client going, it shouldn't,
Yes.
Oh,
100%.
if we just, I love that.
100%.
I love that.
And the thing I've also learned with clients and at least partners is that when you get them excited and you make them dream, they are more willing to buy fun stuff, cool stuff. Of course, within the parameters of the brief, but that just makes a huge difference. So I think the third thing I would say is this little special sauce of a nice relationship is a bit underrated. I think having a great relationship with your client, them feeling like they're in a good space to be able to share with you stuff that they like, stuff they don't like, them being in a good place to be convinced. That's also kind of a journey in terms of getting to great work as well. but I like that. I think everyone loves that. Everybody back in the shop, in the agency, always loves hearing what the clients say, what they liked about it, which one did they like, who did I was like, good. Just the kind of storytelling internally as well. I think we do a lot of grunt work, no matter how senior you get. And so little moments of delight is always important to share with the team, I think.
There's a tendency to forget that this is like a presentation is a presentation, and all the facets of it matter, right? All of the money that they've invested in hopes to get that return on investment. And sometimes we forget that in the moment, that this should be a big moment, an exciting moment. Like, this is all of the thinking on your side of the fence and ours has now come down to this. Let's actually get excited about it. Yeah. Let's change topic just a little bit. What did living and working across Singapore, Shanghai, London, and US teach you how ambition and taste shifts across cultures?
Ambition and taste. It's a very hard question, Brad, but also very interesting. So I think my journey across the different cities is, of course, it's, if you talk about ambition and taste of my personally or of the people around me, or
what you noticed just being in those different environments. Yeah.
It was interesting because it's really enmeshed with the culture and, of course, my interpretation of that as it pertains to brands and marketing. So for me, I think in Singapore, that's where I learned pretty much everything. That's where I actually grew up, in what they call the University of BBDO. All the best suits supposedly come from BBDO. I don't know, supposedly. But the BBH people will fight about this. Anyway, for me, I think Singapore was a good testing ground because it's hard. It's a very practical, very straightforward market. They don't have time for fun stuff unless it's in your face and you're clear with what you're trying to say. So I think that level of brutality in simplicity, in clarity of messaging, was something that I learned as I was kind of growing up as an account person, right? Understanding the brief, being super tight on the strategy, learning how to work with creatives on like being clear with the work and getting the work to meet the brief, I would say. So if you say, for me, I think in those early days, it was about meeting the brief is the ambition, and meeting the sale, making the sale, converting that is. It's just that. And a good job is actually kind of delivering a work like perfectly well, on time. Everyone is happy. That was great. So I think for me, that's kind of created a level of discipline that was important. I think I find a lot of the younger folks, they lose a little bit the time to hone that muscle of discipline and of excellence. Like, I will go mad if a piece of copy, even if it's a direct mailer with a tiny little font and one of those words is wrong, right? So it's that. But I would say taste was almost something that I think kind of really developed for me as I moved to market like Shanghai and China. And this is very, very interesting because when I moved to China, it was almost like everything is max. The ambition is max. They got shitloads of money. They've got everything. They will buy anything and everything, and they will make anything in time. You just have to have an idea that makes sense, but also it makes sense, but you almost think that the market requires a certain level of practicality, which is kind of where I came from in Singapore. But my experience has been these guys, they are very excited. They don't show it. They do not show it, but they're very excited about ideas that are out of the box. I would say, like, I'll give you an example. We were trying to launch a salad restaurant in Shanghai, and one of my guys came up with the idea to have a petting zoo outside of the salad bar, because I mean the locals, they don't really fancy salads for lunch. It's not their thing. But if we had a petting zoo, it would create a certain level of talkability. And I was like, this is mad. This is crazy. So we presented it to the client. Con call, by the way, no video call. Silence on the line. They were like, we call you back. They called us back and they were like, yeah, okay, we like the idea, but instead of a goat, we want a llama, right? We're launching 2 weeks time. So,
Wow.
so yeah, I think to me, it was it was almost like you could do anything you want. So you pushed yourself to be able to do meet the brief, but also kind of go against the grain. When I talk about taste, I think there's in China, I worked a lot on luxury products as well. So premium spirits, luxury brands like Saint Laurent, Lacoste that were trying to market to the Chinese customers, and it was an evolution for me. I think you almost have that transition moment within the Chinese market of them having the means, but then evolving from status driven needs to more discernment. And it was again with the Chinese market, it's so dynamic because it's one day it's this, another day it's that. So yes, it was almost that's kind of the space that I learned a lot about how to push the brief, how to push the budget, but also how to maintain it within a certain level of discernment and substance, meaning I would say that is very important in the Chinese market. It can look great, but it needs to have meaning. The character you use, the poetry, the person, the colors, everything. So I think that to me was a I would say a pivotal moment in my career as well, because after that I moved to London and I started to do a lot of more work in Europe and in the US. And of course the brands that I worked with had like the level of scale and the global application was I would say 10 times more than what I've ever experienced back in Singapore. But I think what I've learned in terms of discipline, in terms of scale, in terms of meaning, in terms of judgment, like making those calls, prioritization, it really helped me kind of flourish in some of these global systems. Um, and in fact, it was almost something that was appreciated most times when I worked with clients, especially in the US or in Europe, that level of just a different perspective than someone in their market would give. So I would say it's been a journey. It's been a ride, and it's still going strong. Hopefully.
So, talking about global markets, what do people usually get wrong about global brand building?
Ah, um, so this is linked to your question about global consistency or local nuance. Is the balance of the two? I think what people normally get wrong is global consistency equals exactly the same line in exactly the same visual approach with exactly the same model. Basically, you take an ad that you shot in New York and you do a Chinese version of it. Like literally, I've seen that happen. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is localization, guys. I'm like, this is very wasteful. So I think that it's lazy. I think there's so much more opportunity and nuance to do a little bit of work to really dig into what's the essence of what we're trying to say, and kind of extrapolate that into what I like to call freedom within a framework, and just really kind of lean into local nuance, local insights to bring ideas to life, because that creates, I think, on a global level, a lot more texture for the brand. Back in the day, I think Airbnb did this really, really well. I think they came up with a back in the day. I'm like 80 years old. When they first launched their global platform, I think it was, what was it? Was it Home Away from Home? And then they brought it to life in different ways in America. They brought it to life like in America, of course, there's more brand platform. It was more like the dream homes that you could stay in. In other markets, they brought it to life in different ways. So it was almost like, I think as marketeers and as brand owners, it's doing a little bit of due diligence and understanding and laying out that framework and getting everyone to understand what that framework is, and then really kicking back and letting the markets get on with it. This is the difficult part. Not necessarily sitting around and letting other people do your work, but there is, of course, still excellence. There's also still governance pieces that you can do, but there's that freedom is hard, I think. The second thing that's really hard, I think, for brand owners to to give up, and that's a wasted opportunity, I think.
I started my career in Toronto, and you could tell when there was no desire for a Canadian adapt because the I would be a maple leaf or the exclamation would be a maple leaf. And I was like, what do you mean? This is the Canadian version. And you're like, I get that we sound the same, but there's differences, and it's not just a maple leaf thrown in somewhere in the ad.
And it's funny because we should know that. That is our job.
Oh, trust me, the people walking around with the art going, we added a maple leaf, they know. But that's the only way you'd get it through.
Sometimes fighting that fight is a bit hard, and I get it. I've been there.
Yeah. Death by 1,000 maple leaves. So when you step into a complex business, what do you listen for first?
I like to look at the dynamics within the client organization. What drives them, what's important to them, what are they trying to get out of their job. I think that's really important because, I mean, in my position, if you're talking about like representing the teams and driving the business with the clients, selling ideas, you need to be able to really get into the minds of some of these clients, knowing who's the stakeholders, knowing who's the decision makers. So I think for me, the first thing stepping in is really understanding the client dynamics, and that's sometimes from what they said, how they say it, but also how they present themselves when they show up, at what stages. It's also a sign. Who they let take the lead. When do they come in at certain space? So I think it's not just so much just kind of sitting in at meetings and just taking a lot of what they say at face value. There's also a lot of the unspoken, I think, codes that you want to try to understand between that dynamic, because for me, I think once we lay that out and at least understand that, then it's the step one to getting to know what really is wrong. Because sometimes the problem is not a marketing problem or a product problem. And there's another problem, and that's our job, right? It's trying to really dig into like where are the gaps, where are the opportunities, and how can we overcome them? How can we find ways around it? This is why I find that creativity is not just for creatives; it's also for account people. It's also for finance people.
Day one, I heard that at Saatchi's. They were like, the finance department in this organization is as creative, if not more, than anyone else.
Oh my God.
And it just, like, it scratched. Like, I just sat there doing this. And then all of a sudden I started learning about these little businesses that were starting within the organization, little startups that they were funding, and all these little bits and bobs. And I went, oh, I get it. It's so interesting to see the risks that they were taking and the creative approaches to building the business and giving people an opportunity to really pursue entrepreneurial spirits within a global agency. So I'm a huge believer in that everyone in the business is creative and needs to be able to find a way to let that out, and the whole business will lift because of that.
Exactly. 100%. I totally agree.
What have you learned about creating trust between client, strategy, creative, and production?
Oh, very tricky. What you're saying, almost all of them.
Yes.
Very tricky. I think the one thing I've learned is, and it's so basic, but it's communication. It's talking. I think it's not always talking, not always all being in the same room. When I say communication, it's how the message is conveyed. It's very important as well. So for certain clients, for certain briefs, and again, this is back in the day, producers, creatives, they don't talk to clients, right? It's the account people that front that relationship. So you need to get all the trust, like that you are translating exactly what they're saying. Nowadays, it's just a friggin' email and CC everybody. Yeah, it's true story, man. But I think communication, how certain messages and are conveyed. I think, for example, sometimes we spend a lot of time on a particular project, been through a few rounds of communication, and I get a sense that the client is not 100% sure about giving certain feedback in front of creatives, in front of other teams. So it's always like finding a space for them to share what they really think, debating with them, trying to get them to understand what certain things are working, why certain things are not, and then translating that for the team in a way that is more positive. Because, and this is one of the things I learned from the beginning, you don't take a client email and forward it to the team internally, because people still do that. People still do that. And then everyone is like, drama. But that's not what they mean. That's not what you take out. There's almost that kind of interpretation of a certain task at hand that needs to be done between clients, between internals. And of course, there's spaces that I think everyone needs to get together, which is important. So when I was working on Skittles, because our team was based in Chicago and the clients were based in New York, and we were going through a period of time where it felt like there was a little bit of angst in the relationship with clients weren't buying anything. They typically buy everything. And so I was like, you know what, let's back up, let's go out, present, we'll have lunch with them, have a word with them. And it really helped. Like, the creative, the strategy, they're like, okay, I get it now. I get why they don't like it. We'll do something else. I have 5 other things to do. They could have just said it in that way. And I was like, yeah, they could have. So, yeah.
When I'm trying to communicate with people that I'm teaching sales and negotiation to, I always talk about a Maslow's hierarchy of effective communication. And at the top is face-to-face.
Yeah.
And then below that is a video call. And then below that is a phone call. And then insert text message, chat format, whatever it is, right? But your effectiveness drops off exponentially at every one of those points.
100%.
But default is email. The worst context to send across. The other thing that resonates is about getting those teams on and translating. And I think there's something for us to learn from a hostage negotiation team. There is one person talking, but 10 to 20 listening, right? And they each have a job to listen for. Listen every time they mention family. Listen every time they get really agitated. What's going on? And I feel like when we go to big meetings and we present creative or we're taking feedback, we don't actually go in strategically, who's listening for what. We just go in and hope that we all hear the same thing.
Yeah.
And then we write some notes and go, there you go, that's what our team heard. And it feels like a real missed opportunity to strategically listen, because there's so much more going on than just the words. And if I'm hearing you right, the back channels after the meetings is where the real communication's getting done, because we're too afraid or we feel worried to communicate that in an open forum.
So I'll tell you the story, and again, it really shows my age. Back in China, they still had smoking rooms in the buildings, and
nice.
They used to say that if you want to get anything done, this is for Pernod Ricard China, are one of our top clients then, and if you want anything done, you need to smoke, and you need to go to the smoking room, because the head of marketing always goes there to smoke. And while you're presenting, so the lead marketeers also smoke. And so you go present, or before the meeting, or later on, or maybe 2 days ago, you presented something that in that space is where you can resell an idea that his team potentially not 100% about. And it's almost like you said, face-to-face, safe space, opportunity, that finding that one moment in their time where they're like clear. They're like, their mind is not on 20 other things. To find that new space.
I had this developer, Ray Larinavicius, and he was a Lithuanian Olympic athlete who had immigrated to Canada. And I think he told me, and paraphrasing, he said when he was 3 years old or 4 years old, he got tapped on the shoulder saying, "You're going to be an Olympian." And he just was this very rigid, no bullshit kind of guy. And I couldn't crack it. Just like he was my lead developer, and there was zero rapport, and I couldn't get in, and I tried everything. And one night I stayed out of the pub till 3 or 4 in the morning with him, and we just went at it back and forth. Next day, it was a light switch had changed, and we couldn't get on better. It was like whatever I needed, he was just there. And it was that being in the trenches, going through and having something beyond just the work. and building that connection. So I still
in
think about that as a huge learning. Please go ahead,
no,
Francis.
it's so true. In Canada or China, one of the things that they say in China is you can't get any work through if the clients don't trust you, and they don't trust you if you don't get drunk with them and dance on a table. Mind you, I came from Singapore where you don't do any of this stuff, right? And I'm sitting here in a huge conference, and one of the insights is building trust and rapport comes from like standing on a table. I'm like, oh my God, it's true. Like until they see, and because I investigated with some of my colleagues. I was like, why is this the case? What are you feeling? What is calculation that's going on in your mind to make this true? And they're like, okay, friend, you need to understand. If you are willing to sacrifice your dignity for this relationship, then this is worth us having a conversation. And I was like, okay.
I'm a bit worried by your metrics, how much trust I've gained over the years.
I worked at alcohol brands in China, my friend, so you do the math.
Nice. Yeah. Well, yeah. Alcohol and pharmaceuticals have been through my career the whole time.
That's a good account.
I launched Viagra in Canada and then Levitra in Australia.
Ooh.
Take from that what you will. I was like, why is this following me?
Interesting ones as well.
Yeah. Imodium, Nizoral, Monostat, and Viagra were all clients of mine at one point. I was like, wow, the itchy, scratchy, leaky, just tap out.
You got the premium of all the pharmaceutical brands, I think, creatively.
Yeah. Well, Viagra was so new and regimented, they would bring in the bottle and do a count of the pills in the bottle at the start of the meeting and the end of the meeting. They were just adamant that nobody got the Viagra. Wow. All right, let's get back on track now. You come back to clarity a lot. What does real clarity actually feel like inside a team?
So we talked a little bit about earlier freedom in a framework, right? Real clarity is different people expressing the same concept or the same idea, the same belief in their own ways. And I think once you operate in a team where everyone gets what we're doing here, everyone knows what the stakes are, where we're trying to go, and they are able to translate that into their own individual parts of the solution. That's when you get, and including the client as well, a well-behaved client who understands that their feedback is critical and very important, so that they take the time to write proper feedback, just as much as we put care in doing those freaking presentations and the thought and all of that. That to me is I think that hopefully the golden standard, and it is possible. Again, back to communication. Like when clients go for a shoot, you gotta tell them what they can and cannot do. A lot of times you're just like running around and you don't tell them. You don't say how you need to behave in this particular shoot. You may have gone on other shoots. This shoot, we're going to operate in a certain way. Nothing against
rules of engagement.
Exactly. And I think people operate much more freely once you're clear with the rules of engagement, whether with clients, whether in instances like a shoot, in events, or even internally, briefing the team.
Yeah, I think if my grandmother was here, she would just be whispering, "The standard you accept is the standard you set," and that just rings true, right? If you don't set those rules, then there are none. What does it take to protect creative ambitious in a commercial environment?
What does it take to protect? I think for me, it takes a couple of things. I think the first thing is safety, safe space. That's very important. Safety within the agency teams, that leadership knows what we're trying to do here. If the client calls them to complain about something, they know they're not going to just turn around and shoot you guys. Everybody, like I said, clarity. If everyone knows why we're doing certain things, there's also that trust that we are working towards certain objectives. There is that verticality in knowing the goal, the ambition. I think that's very important. That creates safety within the team, then that they know how far they can push, how far they need to pull back, because there's a lot of pressure. Like, I don't think we realize that the amount of pressure there is on the creative teams, on the writers, on the designers, everyone, production teams, on getting something right and making that space safe for them to test, to learn, to fail, even especially for the younger ones, is really, really important. I think also one of the things that's important for this is, and this is, I think, a little bit underrated, is the ability to sell into the client's stakeholder tree, the little hierarchy in the client sets. A lot of people think that the client in front of you is like, this is it. This is the end stop. I've spent some time on the client side, and like, we are literally 2% of their entire universe. The kind of stuff, all the stuff they got to deal with is we don't fully appreciate that. And I think one of the best ways to get to great work is to help them sell it internally. And so I think a lot of times we stop at the presentation. You're like, okay, so what, PDF is enough for you? No, sometimes it's not that. My question I always ask my client, I'm like, all right, friend, what's the next step? We got to launch here. I need approvals here. Who do we need to get this in front? And how do they like to be presented to? Some clients, they don't like decks. Some clients need to see the deck before you present to them. Some clients need just a chat. They're like, if you can't present to me verbally, then I'm not buying anything, right? So it's that kind of level of just care, like an understanding of what beyond this presentation does it take to get this over the line and continue to, because again, it's not just this client, right? This client is the marketeer. What about the PR guy? What about the retail, the e-commerce guy? So knowing and understanding their ecosystem, how they operate within that, and how we can help them flourish with that particular idea within their ecosystem, I think is also critical. And safety internally, but also an understanding of the client's ecosystem and how we can help them sell this idea, or maybe evolve it, make it grow in a way that's good for the business and good for the brand, are like super important.
It feels like removing friction on their side has a massive impact.
Yeah. I think it's friction, but also sometimes they don't know that there's friction. Sometimes they really lean into that friction. So in some instances, it's almost like facing that friction for them. I don't know if you've had this situation where you had to like.
I reached out to one of my clients at Aldi, and I just said, when we give you this presentation, what do you do with it? He goes, takes me a day to take what you've done, and I put it into an Aldi deck, and then I walk it around. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, we never show your decks. And I said, great. As of today, we're only presenting work to you in your deck, so that you can take it from the meeting and not have to do this crazy reformatting. And it's such an insignificant thing that made their life easier. And all of a sudden the work is the work, and the work isn't being cut and pasted into a different deck. It just, there's so much of that you can find out by asking questions. One of the questions I used to ask at my agency was, what's the dumbest thing that we do? And I would learn that the team were doing things for me that I didn't know that they were doing, that they thought were mandatories. Brad doesn't like purple, so we would take out purple, right? Like, I don't know what the thing was, but I remember just going, wait, it's not about the purple. But I just remember going like, hold on, you guys are doing all of these things because you think I'm mandating these things, but I didn't know these things even existed. So that continual questioning, both inside and outside of, what are the dumbest things we do? Where are we wasting time? What's really creating a friction point that we don't need to have here, changes little things for everyone.
Yeah, that's big.
All right. It's felt so trivial though. Oh, you mean you just want us to put our information in your deck to present so that it saves you a day? Great, easy. Just if you do a bunch of those little changes, all of a sudden this relationship is about the work and not the busy work.
Yeah. 100%.
All right. How do you know when a brand has found a truth people can actually feel?
Let me think of a brand that I worked on. This is a tricky one. So I worked on Skittles, and Skittles has this brand platform that's around um, basically breaking against common sense. Whatever makes common sense, whatever is conventional, they will break against the that level of predictability. And this platform has been around for like 20 over years. You're talking like generations of people have passed through this platform. And it's weird because the work is like fucking mad. It's like absurd. It's like it doesn't make sense. It's almost like, okay, so you have two people in a sheep's head eating a skittle on the farm. It's all, and different iterations of this level of absurdity, this level of humor. Um, you know that it's hitting some inner need to just not make sense. And that is, to me, fundamentally interesting that a brand would take that human truth and make work from that. Because typically you want something safe, you want something logical. But for a brand like Skittles, they've latched onto that human truth and that human need that's relevant across the ages and able to bring it to life in many different ways. And in fact, we had finally cracked the code of how to bring this to life in China. Typically, this is this concept of breaking against the norm needs to be paired with a certain self-aware type of humor to make it true to the brand. And that's easy in markets where there is a certain concept of this type of humor. But in China, the humor is the self-awareness and sarcasm doesn't exist. So we could not patch it with a certain type of humor. But the team managed to do that in a way. So all that to say is that across cultures, across time, if you're able to kind of latch onto a truth of, at this time there was a teenager or a young adult, because you're not allowed to sell the candy to a certain age people nowadays.
Of course not. Yeah.
Young at heart, etc.
If you can vote, you can eat Skittles.
Exact. And then you pair that with a brand personality and a tone. Then you can kind of, that's when you know it's true for the brand and it's right for the brand and it's right for people at a certain age. That was very interesting for me.
Taste the Rainbow is now on repeat in my head. What kind of courage does the industry talk about too little?
I think this is a challenge I face, I would say, most recently. It's also one of the things that I really liked when I was growing up in the industry. The courage to call bullshit, I think, was something that used to be celebrated. It used to be like, when I was growing up, my role to my boss was, you tell me what I don't see. Show me the blind spots, right? Give me a heads up on certain things that might become a problem, right? Debate, even with my teams, like strategy teams, creative teams, so some of my favorite people in production, right? They're like, yeah, you need to pay 50K extra for that helicopter that the creatives wanted. I'm like, I ain't paying shit. Figure it out, right? So, like that kind of, I think, ability to debate, push and pull each other in recent times for me has become diluted. In a way, I think the relationship between seniority and junior people, there's just been less and less openness in taking feedback and taking notes. I mean, I felt that a lot when I was working in some of the holding company times with, because it was just that, and that's such a huge shame because you basically surround yourself, and this is a people business. You surround yourself with so many talented people who have different levels of expertise, and that inability to accept and even face different types of inputs is a shame. I think that's one of the things that we don't open ourselves up. It's not easy, I know, But
Yeah.
yeah.
You've led me to my next question perfectly. What do you notice in teams that look successful on the surface, but are quietly losing their edge?
I can say this with honesty because I've lived it.
Awesome.
This is what we call the vortex of doom. So maybe through recounting the story, it will reveal some insight. We had been working on repositioning one of the very famous confectionery brands that we had won, and we did the work on the strategy and then the repositioning, very slight tweak in the repositioning. We were trying to translate that into a platform, and there was just churn and hours of changing the wording, changing the way it's expressed, going through different people who were giving everybody's 2 cents worth, and then suddenly introducing, this is my dream, by the way, 3 months of strategy, and then going into a first creative platform, and then saying that everyone can come up with an idea. So we have shopper team review. Everyone's coming up with a brand platform idea. People who are not right fit for the job were coming in, which is fine, right? This is all good, but it takes a lot of time. It took another 4 or 5 months to imbibe everybody's thoughts and notes in, and I think through this process, you lose sight of what you're trying to do in the first place. You lose a lot of finger pointing. It creates churn, it creates distrust, it creates, on the client side, internally, creatives start to doubt themselves. They start to just push stuff out that they don't really care about. And I have to say that I've been through a process like that, and it took like 12 months plus, and we made work, but it got us nowhere really fast.
We made work.
We made work.
That says a lot, doesn't it? We did thing.
I can't even say what it is, but it's just disheartening, like on the client side, internally on the people, brilliant people that I know I work with, and they're just like, why are we doing this, friend? Can I not do another 30-page deck? And I'm like, one more go.
I believe it's a universal truth in the creative industries where there's the seedling of an idea, and then we build defenses around it to get through the gauntlet of whatever it is to get to production. And it's how much we can fight off before that idea becomes blah. And it's a weird construct, right? Whereas, what you were talking about earlier is if you flip it and go, imagine how good this seedling would be if we all defended it, right? If we all nurtured it and we all aimed for it to be the biggest thing that it could be, you'd get a different outcome. Your year-long process, it makes me think of something a former colleague of mine, Matt Jackson, said to me once. He said, and I think we must have been in the same sort of pain that you were in with 1,000 opinions and 100 million meetings. He just said, in all the worlds and all the cities, there are no statues for committees. And that just rang so loud.
Beautiful.
All right, Frances.
Yeah.
What conversations do you hope founder-led businesses start having more honestly?
I think for them, it's being clear with where they want to be and how they want to get there, and the type of relationships they want to have with agencies, or at least their partners, because there is not one, like in this day and age, the old ways are not necessarily relevant for many founder-led agencies and companies. Like, okay, I've got a brief. This is how I do it. This is one agency to do this. This is one agency to do that. This is how we do it. This is the process. I think one of the most important conversations I think we all could be having is how can we make something exciting and interesting in the long term for the people I'm trying to grow with in my business, and how I can do that, which partners are best placed to follow me on this journey instead of this annual rigmarole of pitching that nobody likes. And so, yeah, I think being open about where they want to go, how they can get there, and being open about new ways, new structures, hybrid ways of doing. I say hybrid, like a combination of expertise in AI, potentially creators and influencers. You know, there's a whole ecosystem of possibilities that I think a lot of people are starting to be more open to. It's not a question of budget anymore. It's not necessarily a question of timing either. It's a question of opportunity and appetite, I would say. And we're kind of well poised in this day and age, I say right now, to kind of approach that with a new solution. So be open. I think be open to new ways of doing things that might not be exactly much cheaper, or at least cheaper in your brain. But think about forging some like proper relationships. You know, in the good old days, I say good old days, like I'm 80.
Off camera, I'm going to ask you how old you are because I think we're almost spot on.
In the good old days, some of the best relationships are like with clients and agencies was 20 over years old. I mean, Adidas and TVW was like ages. Like that's a reason. There's a reason for that, right? It's a partnership and how we approach it and how we, I think, as partners evolve with you, with the environment. And I think a lot of the traditional solutions have not been able to evolve, and maybe they can't. So being open to, all right, guys, what can we do? How else can we do this in that way? I think a lot of people are starting to scratch that itch, which is interesting, which is very, how do I put it? Optimistic for me. It's very hopeful.
Those long-term brand agency relationships, there's an innate trust and shorthand that you can't shortcut. That only comes through time, pressure, and exactly. I think there's a freedom that comes with that to as you said earlier, call bullshit when something's not right, and that goes both ways, not just the agency being the person engaged, right? The seller.
Oh, for sure.
All right. I realize we've gone a bit over time. I've got two last questions for you. What do you hope people feel clearer about after working with you?
Well, two things. I think I hope they're clearer about what their problem is. Okay, maybe not problem, but what their challenge is, right? What their challenge that is stopping them from achieving greatness, their ambition. It's being clear on that, because identifying the problem is the first step. Oh my God. It's the first step towards, creating an ecosystem of a solution towards it. And I think the second piece, I think for me, and which I always hope to walk away with in any of these conversations, is to make them feel a little bit braver to chase that dream, whatever that dream is within the context of their job or of their brand, because we all love to sprinkle a little bit of ourselves in our work, and it just makes it more fun and it's just more human. So I think, what's stopping you? How can we get there? I think that's as simple as it gets.
Last question. What would you do if you were not afraid?
Oh my God, I would be like a freaking singer. What would I do if I was not afraid and had a voice that could follow a note? I'm Filipino, so
cultural birthright, karaoke.
It's still bad.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Frances, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to sharing this with everyone else. And that's another episode of Inside the Collective. We will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.